Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today is going to be a very interesting scenario. So this is going to be the 2020 general election between Ralph Northam and Ed Gillespie because they were both running for Virginia governor. I wanted to see how they would play out in a general election against each other after 4 years of President Trump. And of course this is not going to happen, and this is pretty much just an alternative history scenario, but pretty much it's just going to be Ralph Northam versus Ed Gillespie. So we're just going to go through the map now. Safe blue states, of course, the western coast. Safe red states. Usual states that are safe red would be considered safe red. Some states that went for Trump may be considered toss-ups. We're going to go through the safe blue states. So pretty much once I fill in the Northeast, those will be all the safe blue states. And yeah, so I think Minnesota would be safe blue because I think Gillespie's policies are a little too right-wing for Minnesota progressives to be enough to come out and not vote. I think they would vote against him rather than how they did in 2016 where they didn't vote at all. So pretty much this is the safe map versus Gillespie. So we have 197 for Northam and 175 for Gillespie. You know, Virginia is going to be the first swing state I'm going to call. Virginia is typically more Democratic during presidential election years, and I think Northam would win the state of Virginia based off all his backing in Northern Virginia, his heavy support up there. But now we just have Gillespie losing his home state, Northam winning his home state, which is why it's such an interesting case. Gillespie's policies, I think, definitely would win him in states, give him a win in states like North Carolina and Georgia. The reasoning behind it is I think that Gillespie would be able to hold on to all, both of these Trump states because I think his policies really outline a moderate Republican who's leaning towards the further right. President Trump, his policies are both somewhat liberal leaning and somewhat right wing leaning. By right wing, I mean like alt-right leaning. He's not really in the middle, but his really economic policies are really what pushed him nearing that 270 mark, pushed him over that 270 mark in the states like the Rust Belt. That was their main issue: jobs, the economy, getting away from the Obama administration, things like that. And I think Ed Gillespie would be able to win those voters that voted against President Trump because they thought that he was too far to the right, and they didn't think that he was stable enough to hold the highest office. And I think they would come back and vote for Gillespie, but I don't think Gillespie would get that. He's a businessman factor and the white working class vote, but we're going to see how that plays out. So the Rust Belt, I think, would flip to the Democratic side. My reasoning behind it is I think Northam would be able to take these voters. Although he is a weak candidate, I think he would be able to take these voters because the only candidate who could actually win the Rust Belt is someone like Mike Pence or Donald Trump. They need to be someone who has that I'm a businessman factor or I'm tied to the Trump administration, and they need to say, we have economic policies that will work for you. You've been out of work. Your steel jobs were gone. We'll bring them back. I don't think Gillespie is that guy. His policies don't necessarily outline that. And I think he could be painted as someone who was like Mitt Romney, like a corporate raider, things like that. So just going through this map, Iowa is most likely going to stay red. They've voted for Trump by around 10%, and I don't think that Gillespie is going to really lose that state. And same thing with the state of Ohio. I think that one would go to Gillespie for the same reasons as Iowa. I think the conservative vote would come out for Gillespie and essentially give him the win there. In Maine, I don't think that Gillespie would win a single electoral vote from Maine. Although he is a conservative, I think that, actually I know for a fact that the state of Maine probably, not for a fact, that's just my speculation actually, but I think that if Donald Trump was not the Republican nominee, I think Maine wouldn't have been competitive. If it wasn't competitive for Mitt Romney and it was for Donald Trump, there's something different there, and that's probably because Donald Trump was the nominee and Mitt Romney was the nominee in 2012. So I think that Maine won't be competitive this time around, with Gillespie being on the other end of the ticket. In Nevada, I'm not going to come to just yet. In a state like Florida, you know, that one's going to be really tough. I think Gillespie would have more of an appeal in a state like Florida, and I think he would be able to win that state. Giving him 259 electoral votes. I think the older vote, the older population, all the senior citizens, I think they would come out to vote for Gillespie. Northam wouldn't really bring out those Cuban Americans to vote for the Democratic side, and I think just like Trump, he will carry the state of Florida. In a state like New Hampshire, I think New Hampshire is probably that one. That one's going to be a pure toss-up, just based off where it's rated. I think that one would be a pure toss-up. Colorado. Colorado's probably going to stay blue. Northam would probably win the state of Colorado, but the state of Nevada, I think that one would flip. After the Las Vegas shooting, I think Gillespie would be perceived as more hard on terrorist attacks, although it was a gun issue mainly. That's how people perceived it, as a gun issue. I think that although it may be a gun issue, I think Northam wouldn't be that candidate. All those MS-13 ads won't be playing well around these areas, and Gillespie would probably win in a state like Nevada. And it all comes down to the state of New Hampshire as to whether or not it would be an electoral tie or not. And I do not think it would be. I think Northam would narrowly win the state of New Hampshire. I think he would be able to grab onto those northern voters and bring them over to his side. But I think it would be a very, very narrow victory. So this is the final electoral map. 273 for Ralph Northam and 265 for Ed Gillespie, being one of the closest elections besides the Bush v. Gore election and the Hayes-Tilden election. But in modern political history, this is probably going to be one of the closest elections based off where I think the states would vote. So this is the final electoral map. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you all tomorrow.